Welcome, everyone. My name is Liz Yetter. I am the East Central Indiana Regional Specialist with State of Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management, or SICM. If you've been with us before but haven't been with us recently, SICM did recently undergo a name change. We used to be Southern Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management, but at the beginning of this year, we changed to state because we are working throughout the entire state of Indiana now. And some of my fellow regional specialists, I believe we have Amber and Mandy, are on the call with us as well, along with Dawn Slack, our project coordinator. And like Heather said, please feel free, put questions in the chat during. No need to be worried about interrupting. We want this to be as much of a conversation as possible over Zoom. I know it can be a little awkward. And here we go. So first, I like to start all of these out with just a couple definitions so we're all on the same page. So first, what's a native species? What makes a plant or animal or organism native? So a native species is something within its native range, and it has essential relationships with both the physical environment and other organisms around it that enable it to complete its life cycle. So everything in nature kind of runs on a cycle. We see it when the forest starts to come alive in the spring with our spring wildflowers, as well as, and then the shrubs start to break bud, and then the trees eventually mature as the wildflowers die off. So everything works within that cycle. And just a few of our native plants, we've got our coneflower, our state tree, the tulip tree, and then pawpaw, which can get very thick in a wooded setting, but it is a native species. So just because a native species might get a little large or have a large population in an area doesn't mean it is invasive, because to be an invasive species, it has to be non-native and it has to cause some sort of harm to either human health, the environment, or the economy. So when we're talking about invasive species, they're always going to be a non-native species, and they're causing some sort of harm to the environment or other factors. So on the same page with that, we'll get going with some of our grasses. So this first grass, Stiltgrass, or also known as Japanese Stiltgrass, it is a shade-loving grass. So this is a grass we're seeing spread a lot in our forested areas because it will grow very well in the shade. It is a low-lying grass. So while it has a lot of length, it does not stand up erect like some of the other grasses we'll talk about today. And this time of year is when it really starts to become present or more noticeable, and it starts to produce its seed here in both August and September, depending on where you're at. You can see some in this photo here. The blades of the leaf blades here are smooth, kind of oval shaped. So smooth meaning they don't have any teeth on the edges, and then they have this silver midrib or stripe running right down the middle of the leaf. So that is one of the key identifying characteristics of this grass when you're out looking for it, is this kind of silver vein going right down the center of the leaf. And then into the fall, later fall, it will turn kind of a yellowy orange. And then you can see down here in this other picture, a close-up of the fruit. So the seed, which grows under the stem of the grass, so if you pull up the grass, you'll see it kind of underneath it. It does not grow on top or stick up. It's got an awn, which is this little tail here at the beginning of the grass, or at the beginning of the seed, excuse me. And that will be key in distinguishing it from some of our native grasses that we'll see here in a second. So just some more on Japanese siltgrass. This picture here on either side of the trail, you can see it kind of starting to move in more to the woods. So this can completely replace the ground cover in an area in 3 to 5 years, and each plant can produce hundreds to up to 1,000 seeds that remain viable for 5 or more years in the soil. So as you remove stuff, always keep in mind that seed banks The soil contains a seed bank of both our native seeds, but also the invasive. So monitoring and follow-up are key when controlling any invasive plants. And the thing with the Japanese stiltgrass is it gets spread a lot through recreation and through human use. So either on our gear, our shoes, if we're horseback riding, so cleaning out the treads of your boots, brushing off gear in between sites is key to help prevent the movement of this guy. Now onto some lookalikes. We do have a couple lookalikes, or we have one native lookalike that commonly gets confused because they do grow in a similar area. So this is our native white grass. And as you can see here, the nodes here, so where the where the stems come together on the native whitegrass, they are fuzzy, so they're going to have fine hairs, whereas the stiltgrass does not. And then the fruit or the seed here doesn't have that little hook on the end. It doesn't have that on. So that's key when looking at these, because they do, as you can see, if you look at just a patch, it does look similar from a distance. Next, another invasive plant that sometimes grows in similar areas, but once it's fruiting, does look quite different from our stiltgrass. It's Asian smartweed. And so without the fruits, the leaves and a patch of this can look very much the same. So the big thing is, you can see here the flower, it's got a very showy pinkish purple flower that sticks up erect above the plant. And then it has, I don't know if we'll see it the next, nope. You can see here where the joints are on the stem, that there are these kind of longer bristles coming up on the orbital. And then next, this is just a chart, and you'll get these slides. You'll definitely all get these slides after kind of comparing the two, so you can look and see what they're kind of what they look like looking at them all at once. So again, that shiny midrib, that silver on the leaf for the Japanese stiltgrass is a big indicator, but if sometimes it's faded or not quite sure, then move on. So the native is going to have a hairy ring at the node or where those at the joint of the grass. So, and they do all kind of bloom different times of the year. So treatment. So stiltgrass is an annual grass. So it's gonna grow up a little bit because it doesn't stand erect like some of our others, and then die back in the fall. So treatment ideally is done during the growing season or before it comes out in the spring. So small populations can be hand pulled before seed production. Just keep in mind, anytime you're pulling something out by the roots, you are stimulating that soil. So if that population's been there a while, you're gonna stimulate that seed bank, and then just going back and continuing monitoring. Mowing for this grass can be quite ineffective just due to having to time it correctly. So before flower or seed production has occurred, because of where the flower lies on this grass underneath the leaf, you can't always see it. And mowing it can actually stimulate the grass to produce the seed when it's shorter. So that can actually stimulate growth at a lower level. So mowing, unless you can time it just right, we tend to avoid for manual treatment. And then you have a few options for herbicide. All of these are listed with their active ingredients. So as always, when you're working, if you choose to work with herbicide, follow the label, follow the label, follow the label. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the chemical you are purchasing. But typically what a lot of landowners use glyphosate-based chemical during the growing season. And you might have to do repeated treatments, doing a foliar spray on those. And someone correct me, 2% on the foliar spray, or are we at a lower percentage for this one? I don't have
You can actually use a 1%
1%.
on this
Okay.
one, Liz. Yep.
Okay, great. So 1% for most of these. And then if you have a really thick patch or a really dense infestation, you can always go with, and the glyphosate doesn't seem to be working. There are several grass-specific herbicides that could be used. Just keep in mind that if it is growing with other grasses, they are also going to be damaged. So sometimes we have to make trade-offs when we're controlling invasive plants. So that's kind of an overview of stiltgrass. This is one that is not throughout the entire state of Indiana yet, but it is spreading. So be on the lookout for this. And it's always easier to control a small population than a large one. This next one, common reed, or often just referred to as Phragmites, is a warm season grass. It's native to Europe, and it's thought that it got here in some ballast material in the 17 or 1800s, whereas a lot of our stuff does get brought in by the nursery trade. Occasionally they get brought in accidentally. This one is detrimental, especially to our wet areas and our wetland areas. It creates these thick, dense mats. As you can see here along roadside, this one's in a lower lying area. And it can really take over an area. It's going to alter the hydrology of an area and make a lot of areas harder to get into. So this is one, it has it's a tall, erect grass, and it's got a hollow stem. It's going to be smooth, it's going to be hard, you're going to be able to kind of break it off and have that tube. It creates these big, dense seed heads you can see here, and they have some different colorations depending on the time of year we've got that purple color, which is where stuff is kind of now, and then they'll get drier as the year progresses. They can grow up to 15 feet tall, and they have you can see here stiff, kind of very pointed leaves, kind of on the lower stem and throughout. Are we going to have another? Oh. We do have a native Phragmites, which these photos are all from Indiana. These are all from southern Indiana. And the big difference is its growth habit. So see here, this is one clump and it's in another with other warm season grasses. It's got this reddish stem, whereas our invasive one, you can see here, it's always going to be in a dense patch. It creates this monoculture. It spreads via the seeds, but also rhizomes. So like these roots are spreading underground. Whereas our native, it's going to be one or two stems in a little clump. It's got a much less robust seed head. And then this purple, reddish purple coloring on the stem is a major indicator. The invasive Phragmites will not have that. So, yeah. So the big thing, I see the Phragmites a lot in ditches or on roadways or in low-lying areas. That's where it's been most often, at least in East Central Indiana. But again, it can be quite detrimental if it gets into a wetland area.
Liz,
yeah,
going back just a moment, Andrea's asking, should we be concerned about the Asian smartweed?
Yeah, so the Asian smartweed, it is one that it's not, we have it in Indiana, and someone else feel free to jump in, and we're seeing it spread. I don't know what it is ranked currently on the Indiana invasive plant list, if it's at a medium or a high. Dawn?
It's so Asian smartweed is actually, we have not assessed it yet.
Okay.
It's not been ranked. Liz is correct. It is still an invasive species. We know it's there. To be honest, we ignored it for a long time and just didn't really recognize how much it was spreading. So it is upcoming that we will assess it. We already know it's invasive. We just have not ranked it yet. Please do treat it. It does respond to glyphosate. So
and
low
for
percentage.
Yeah, for that one, also if you're in a wet area, because the Smartweed tends to like it a little wetter, you might look into an aquatic glyphosate as well, one labeled safe for aquatic areas.
I was seeing Smartweed in my yard and actually thought it was really pretty and left it until I realized it was invasive and I started pulling it. And just in my yard, I was able to control it that way. And actually now I see Jennifer is saying the same thing. She's pulling them. And should she bag the plants and trash them?
So I typically just pull mine too, and then I just rip it in half and I just let it lay, or I pile it and just kind of let it wither. They do tend to wither pretty quickly. So you can, normally from Mom Heather, I do kind of the same thing you do. I pull it, I rip it apart, so I sever the roots from the rest of the plant and I let it lay and decompose. So if that works for you, you can do that.
That sounds great. Thank you. Okay, well, Liz, we'll turn it back to you to continue.
Yeah, great questions, guys. So this one, if you're going to use herbicide to treat, cut it down so it's lower. So you're not, one, it's a safety thing, you're not spraying above your head. And two, you're going to get better contact and it's going to be able to be absorbed into that massive root structure more quickly. This one does have some manual options. You can, before it seeds, cut, if it's a small patch and you can dig out the root masses, great. Otherwise, repeated cutting and mowing can be effective for Phragmites. If you can get in there when it's not too wet, that's a big thing with that. And before seed sets, just because they are lightweight seeds and they do float really well on the wind. So if you introduce a rotating blade to that, the seeds will go even farther. But this one, it does have a pretty long growing season. So getting out there and getting it cut back can be effective. Yes, I see the question, Barbara, about native grasses, and we have a whole section of that at the end, but great question. It won't let, okay, there we go. So another rhizome grass, reed canary grass. So it, I'm sorry. So this is one, again, it doesn't, it will constrict waterways. It can damage irrigation canals. It likes wet areas, moist areas. And it really creates this dense, thick mat, both in the rhizomes, but also in how the plant grows. When it starts to die for the year, it kind of folds in on itself. And it's really, if you've ever been in a field with reed canary grass, trying to walk through it can be very difficult. So we got some great up close of the, so the big identifying characteristics for this one, you can see here in the sheath where the leaf kind of wraps around the stem of the grass. Sorry, I lost my place. My screen's doing funny things on my end. I think I'm having some connection issues. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Liz, and this presentation looks fine on our end.
Okay, great. So we're going to keep going. So this is one, it's going to have that rough texture. It's hairless, as you can see in these zoomed in areas. And it's going to have a, I have another photo of this. Okay. Flat, wide leaf. They can get quite tall, anywhere 2 to 9 feet. And we'll see in the next picture. So the panicle or the seed head, it starts really closed off, and then as it matures, it opens up. So you can see it here. So you can see here, this one's at the water's edge. It's growing in there. It looks like there's also some milkweed and some other stuff in there as well. And it just kind of creates these thick, dense stands. Like with all of these grasses, I'm sure you're seeing a pattern, the thickness of the area. So so this is one. Oh, I didn't include manual for this one. I'm sorry. I will update that before. So this is one, you have a couple options for foliar, either in the spring or in the fall. This one, aquatic area, making sure your formulation is, or your product you're using is labeled for aquatic use is important because of how it grows. And it can be done in the spring before it flowers, or in the fall, pretty much up until we have consistent frost. As far as manual treatment for this one goes, I'm sorry, I'm blanking. Dawn, can you hop in on this one?
Yes, sorry.
Thank you. No, you're good.
So you can string trim. We recommend while during the growing season, you can mow or use a string trimmer to prevent the seed heads from being produced for reed canary grass and limit that seed production. We typically suggest that if possible, and you're okay with this, do both manual and chemical control to really get this under control. So you would continuously mow it once, maybe twice during the growing season, and then hit it in the fall with a good chemical application, just with a, a 3% glyphosate. You could even do a 2% glyphosate fall application, and that really will cut down on your infestation with reed canary grass, kind of a combo treatment there.
Thank you. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of answered that, Patty, but yes, with any of the grasses, trimming them back helps with treatment, because then there's less travel time for the herbicide to get down to that roots, which is where a lot of the strength of the plants are. So this next grass has a lot of different names and a lot of different species. Sometimes it's called maidenhair grass, Chinese silvergrass, Amur silvergrass. There's one that's striped like a zebra, but they're all Miscanthus species. They're very popular in the landscaping because they're quite showy, they get quite large, and they do, people like them for privacy. But like I said, there's over 100 cultivars. Some of the cultivars are labeled as low spreading or low seeding varieties, but they are all still have been found to be invasive and to move. And these grasses are very flammable, and they can create fire hazards, especially in other areas of the country that are more susceptible to wildfires. Because of their height, the flames can go up these plants and actually transport the fire to larger trees nearby or help it hop from area to area. So this is kind of the more stereotypical silvergrass that you see with these white flowy heads. It can grow up to 12 feet tall. Not all varieties, but a lot have a silver midrib, so that silver vein running down the middle of the leaves, the lower leaves here. Some varieties also have leaves that are striped or segmented down the leaf, look kind of like zebra stripes, and they reproduce via rhizomes and create dense mats. You can see here, each of these clumps is a clump of Miscanthus that have moved around, or in that case, it looks like they've been planted, but So manual, small patches can be dug out or repeatedly cut back. Again, one of those where a manual and a chemical can go really well together for this one. Cutting them back, getting them to a more workable level on your end in terms of safety, and then treating them. If you are going to dig them out, like we said before, dig them out, put them all in one pile, let them break down, break them apart. And then when you dig stuff out like that, you can just monitor one area to see if things have resprouted. Again, any manual try to do before, well, they do spread via the root, they can also spread via seed. Do it before the seed head comes on. And this is one we're seeing it spread more and more throughout the state, out of its nice little patches in the landscaping. And then I'm going to let Dawn take over for the small carpet grass, because this is one I have not worked with really at all.
Okay, so small carpetgrass, Arthroxon hispidus, is kind of new to the state. It's been here for at least 10, 12 years. And primarily we started noticing it in the southern part of the state, especially there along the Ohio River. It is now all the way into the middle part of the state, Brown County, Monroe County. We're finding it in those locations already. So this is one that we'd really like to get a handle on. It grows in the same type of habitat that Stiltgrass does. And often you will see both grasses growing together. They like it kind of wet. And we thought this one was primarily a wetland species, but I have actually seen this plant creep up into slopes, side slopes along a wetland, even more drier areas. And it does respond to fire, as most grasses do. So if you're trying to burn it or mow it, that stimulates that growth pattern underground, and you're going to spread this one just like you would with any other grass. If you're mowing it during seed production, you're going to spread it again, just as Liz mentioned earlier, by blowing it all over the place with your blayer on your mower or your string trimmer. So this one has kind of oval shaped leaves with a point, and it has a clasping stem. Thank you, Liz, very much. It also has hairs down at the bottom where it clasps around the stem. There are little tiny hairs that kind of poke out, perfect, right there where your pointer is. And then this one has a kind of a bird's foot standard seed production there at the terminal end, and as well as along the stem. It doesn't always produce just terminal flowers, but also right there where the leaf is coming out of the stem. So this one is a little bit different. It does not have a silver midrib. And the leaf is a little fatter and shorter than most other grasses. It will reach, I've seen this reach 2.5 to 3 feet tall in thick infestations. And again, it just outcompetes everything and pretty much becomes a monoculture growing along with Japanese stiltgrass. It has a wavy leaf margin, and that's the other way of kind of identifying this. So that shorter, fatter stem, the clasping around this shorter, fatter leaf, the clasping around the stem, and that wavy margin, as Liz is kind of pointing out with her pointer there, it has kind of a wavy margin to it when you're looking at it when it's growing in an area. You can, there is a native deer tongue that people typically get it confused with. And deer tongue will also create a very thick infestation, but it's native. It's going to die back, and other things can grow with it. Deer tongue does not have those marginal hairs on the leaf. It does wrap around the leaf at the end, but it doesn't have the marginal hairs. It does not have a wavy leaf margin as well. And the leaves of deer tongue are much longer. They tend to be 2 inches to 10 inches, and so not so short, while the small carpet grass will be 1 to 2 inches and more of an egg shape, while the deer tongue is a much stronger lanceolate shape all along the stem of the plant. Deer tongue is also a perennial. Small carpet grass is an annual, which will kind of help us treat it just a little bit. And the stems, as mentioned here in this one, before we go to the next slide, the stems don't root at the nodes of deer tongue grass. They will root at the nodes of small carpetgrass. They do not do that for the native deer tongue, which is a dicanthelium or a panicum. Next slide. Okay. So now you can kind of see the difference. On the left is the small carpetgrass. You've got a shorter 1 to 2 inch leaf clasping along that stem, and you got those little hairs right where her cursor is. The deer tongue, the native deer tongue, has a much longer leaf, much strappier, and you do not have all of the hairs along the leaf margin that you're going to have with small carpetgrass. It's a much more robust plant. It's taller, it's more robust versus kind of a limpy carpetgrass that has a tendency to be a little bit light color and just not as robust of a plant. You will not see a wavy, curvy margin that you'll see with the carpetgrass as well. Okay, so I think we have a treatment one next. You can pull those small infestations, or you can mow it, but you need to do it before it produces seed in late summer. And just as a caution with any type of manual removal, if you're pulling a grass especially, and you're leaving a bare area, any grass seed that is in that bare area is going to now have a greater chance of growing. So kind of understand those dynamics. You can pull it, and I encourage you to pull those small infestations. I pull my small infestations, but I know I have to return frequently and stay on top of any new seed that's going to be exposed and therefore have light and be able to grow. So until you exhaust a seed bank, you're going to be constantly pulling. That is okay for small infestations. Chemical that's approved for in or near water, because again, small carpetgrass is a water-loving plant. It tends to grow in wetland areas. You need to have a chemical that's approved near the water, like some of our glyphosate products like Rodeo. And you can treat with a chemical at 1% if you're going to use something like Post or Select or Plateau. You're going to use even less than 1%, typically 1/4 to 1/2% in a solution of water. So you're going to treat from 1 June all the way to August. Stop treating when they've gone to seed because it's ineffective. You're wasting your chemical. And you would treat those infants. So if you start treating early on June 1, you're going to have to continue to treat throughout the growing season, because as you treat, you kill the part of it, new seed is going to be exposed and it's going to be able to grow through. So you can wait until later in the growing season, but do it before it starts to produce a seed head. I think that's all we have for that one. Carpetgrass is in Eagle Creek. That's great.
Yeah, so that kind of wraps up the invasive. These are not all the invasive grasses in the state of Indiana. These are just kind of some of the more common ones, and also some of the ones that definitely need to be looking out for. So before we move on, questions? So just some native grasses. We'll go through a couple in more detail, and I'll show you a great new tool that's available for looking up native plants. But these are some of our native grasses that look good in landscaping. They have fun shape or texture, or like I think the prairie cordgrass grows a lot like the Miscanthus does. So a nice swap out. The blue stem, you obviously get the nice color with that. And we'll look at a couple a little more closely, a couple of my favorites, because I made the PowerPoint, so that's what I picked.
Liz, can I pop in here and address one of the questions? Thank you. So the pasture, if you've got Stiltgrass on the edge of your pasture, you can, it would be great if you could plant it with some of our native grasses, like our native blue stems. the Indian grass, and some of our other natives that are very palatable as a pasture grass. Now, they're more of a clump grass and they're not going to grow then like fescue, but fescue is a non-native grass and we actually treat it as invasive in many instances. So I would encourage you then to treat that or to seed that area with probably an annual rye to get it growing pretty quick, and then also supplement with some native seeds like the blue stems. Short blue stem would probably be, or little blue stem would probably be my preferred pasture grass, as well as some of the other ones like, gosh, I'm drawing a complete blank, but some of the shorter ones, and I don't know why, it'll come to me in a minute, but those are your best bet for a pasture.
So just northern sea oats, they're kind of a fun one. They have fun texture. These little oats persist kind of through the winter. And then here's a more close-up of Indian grass. Again, a little bit taller, like some of the grasses that are in landscaping. Just one additional resource. So the Indiana, are you guys seeing the Indiana Native Plant Finder? Okay, so this is kind of a new tool from the Native Plant Society. I wanted to show everyone, but if you're looking, you can search by like what your area is like, but also if you just want grasses and sedges, it has a nice kind of generates a decent list. And then if you were to click on one, little blue stem, you'll get even more photos, what its moisture, and some other quick facts about it, and where you can find more information. So just a good tool to know about and use if you're not sure where to start with some of these. So I am going to stop sharing now.